Hello, Rabbi Yosef Elia, and welcome to Jerusalem Hebrew's weekly reading of the top 10 most frequent words in each week's Torah reading, as well as the top most repeated phrases in each week's Torah reading. This week's Torah reading is Exodus chapter 18, verse 1 through chapter 20, verse 22, Parashat YITRO, not to be mispronounced as YITRO. That's an example of applying the conventions of English onto the Hebrew language. So we need to be careful not to apply the practice of pronouncing TRs in English onto Hebrew, in which case you transform the correct pronunciation of the tal or thal from a ta or a tha into a ch sound like ch as in cheese. So not yitro, but yithra, or in modern Hebrew, yitro. Yitro. All right. Parashat YITRO. The first of the top 10 most frequent words is Hahar. Hahar. That is a mountain, refers to Mount Sinai throughout this week's Torah reading. Number 2, Ha-Elohim. Ha-Elohim refers to and connotes the powerful authority. It could be any authority. It does not inherently mean absolute divinity. The word Elohim does not mean absolute deity, although it frequently refers to the absolute deity. But the fact that it refers to the absolute deity is not something that you know from the inherent meaning of the word. It's similar to how the word king does not inherently mean absolute deity, although you can certainly refer to the absolute deity as king. No less true with this word. Elohim does not mean absolute deity, although it is a frequent reference to God. The Ha prefix in Ha Elohim emphasizes the absoluteness of God's power and authority in the context of it referring to Adonai, the eternal one, the God of Israel. Number 3, Atah. Atah. Atah means you. This is specifically the masculine singular subject form of you that is the doer. You, the doer, as opposed to you, the receiver of an action. So ata would not be translated from English you anytime you say you in English. Rather, ata would be how you translate you from English to Hebrew only if the you that you're using is the actor of an act, the doer of an action in the sentence you're translating. So that's the difference between saying you love me as opposed to saying I love you. If I say you love me, then you could translate that you as ata because you are the doer of love. Okay, you're the one exhibiting the love. But if I say I love you, in that context, we would not translate the you in the phrase I love you with ata. Why? Because you in the sentence I love you is not the subject, but rather the object receiving the act of love coming from the subject in I love you. Okay, I know it can be confusing, but it is very important that one understand certain basics of grammar in order to clearly understand the usages of words in new languages, unless you have the privilege to be fully immersed in the language, but most people do not have that. And that also will take extra time if you're not willing to learn basic terms of grammar. So we need to know what's a verb, what's a noun, what is an object, what's a direct object. Number 4, had-davar, had-davar. Had-davar is frequently translated as word, although usually in the Bible, it is better to translate it as the matter or matters, right? And when it would be translated as word, it does not refer to specific written words, but rather to a word or words in the sense of concepts, not in the sense of a written specific word. That's a different word in the Hebrew language. So davar is more accurately, typically, better translated as matter rather than word. Modern Hebrew is often frequently translated as thing, well, used in the sense of thing as well. And that's also the case in the Hebrew of the Bible in certain contexts. Ad-davar, the matter. Number 5, huthan, huthan. Huthan means father-in-law. It's the same root used for referring to marriage, or one of the words for marriage at least, hatuna, in modern Hebrew, hatuna. And it's also the same root used in reference to a groom at a wedding, a hafan, or a khatan. And it's also the same root used to refer to a son-in-law, hatan. That is huthan, father-in-law. Number 6, YITRO. YITRO is Jethro, Jethro, the father-in-law of Moses, and the root meaning is possibly any of the following, most likely from a root word that means remaining or surplus, more or abundance, and the O suffix means his. So it could be something like referring to someone in an honorable way as saying uh, his abundance or his excellency instead of referring to him directly. And such indirect references to the person you're speaking to is common in Semitic languages as a sign of respect. YITRO, and not YITRO. YITRO. Number 7, min. Min. Min means from. Min. Min can also mean than. In this Torah reading, the word min usually means from. Min. Number 8, sareh. Sareh. Sareh, it's the same root word from which we get Sarah in English, from the Hebrew Sarah. Sareh means regents of, or you could translate it variously as governmental overseers of, administrators of, supervisors of, and it refers to one who supervises over divisions, but it is not a term for an absolute authority. Sometimes this term sar, sareh being sar of, sar's plural of, it's sometimes translated as prince from Hebrew. When it's translated as prince, it is only intended in the older usage of the term prince, as in a principal leader. It does not mean ever in Hebrew prince in the common sense of the term prince in English. Many translate Sar as prince, when it's theologically convenient for them, although this is disingenuous. They do so to fabricate support for pre-existing beliefs. However, Sar never means prince in the sense of son of a king. This prince is only an acceptable translation of Sar when the word is understood in the older sense of the term prince, that is, a leader among other leaders, such as a principal among many other principals of other schools or principles of an organization and so forth. That is sort of an overarching authority, but one among others. However, usage of Sod in the sense of son of a king is not the way that the term is supposed to be understood and was not historically understood that way. So one should avoid translating Sod with the term prince unless you know for sure that the majority of your readers will understand it in the historically accurate way rather than committing anachronisms. Number 9, elecha. Elecha. Elecha means to you. Elecha can also be rendered unto you or toward you. El means to or toward, and the suffix cha is the singular direct object you, in contrast to ata, which we had earlier. So ata is you in the sense of a subject, the doer in a statement or a sentence, and cha is a frequent form of you in Hebrew when the you is the object receiving the action. Elecha, to you, unto you, or toward you. Number 10, im. Im means if, usually means if, but sometimes it may mean whether, in the sense of whether this or that, or whether you will go. And sometimes im can take on other meanings, depending on whether it's paired with other words, such as ha'im. Ha'im which literally means the, if, sets up a question. Im in this week's Torah portion, and typically it just means if. Do not confuse im with an aleph, meaning if, with im with an ayin, which means with. Classic example of the importance of differentiating between aleph and ayin. Im with an aleph is if, and im with an ayin is with. Top 3 most frequent two-word phrases in the Torah portion. Ethha'am. Ethha'am. That means the people. The eth is not usually translatable. It simply lets you know that the following noun is the object receiving the action previously appearing in a phrase. Ethha'am, the people. Refers to a people, that is a specific people, as opposed to a random group of people. Number 2 of the top 3 most frequent two-word phrases in the Torah portion. Herthen Moshe. Herthen Moshe means the father-in-law of Moses, in reference to YITRO, Jethro, who urged the establishment of the Great Sanhedrin. Number 3, Kol Asher. Kol Asher means all which. It could also, depending on context, alternatively be translated as everything that or anyone who, depending on context. Kol is a very important Hebrew word to prioritize learning. Kol can be variously translated as all, every, any, each, even can be translated as entire or whole. Kol asher, all which. Top 3 phrases that are 5 words and over in this week's Torah portion. Herthen Moshe eth kol asher. Herthen Moshe eth kol asher. This is an incomplete sentence, and we could not provide an entire sentence because this was the only portion that was repeated multiple times in the Torah portion. So Herthen Moshe is the father-in-law of Moses, eth kol asher, everything that. Number 2, Sare alofim, Sare me'eth, Sare hamishim, or Sare asareth. One more time. Sare alofim, Sare me'eth, Sare hamishim, or Sare asareth. Leaders of thousands, leaders of hundreds, leaders of 50s, and leaders of 10s. And finally, the third most frequent 5 or more word phrase in this week's Torah portion is وشافطوا أثهعم بخول عث. وشافطوا أثهعم بخول عث. And they shall judge the people in every time period. Here, time period is just this one word, eth. It can also just refer to a point in time. And that concludes this week's review of the top 10 most frequent words in this week's Torah portion and the top phrases. Join us again next week. Be'ezrat Shaddai. Until then, Shabbat Shalom.